Talking to air traffic control can be one of the most intimidating parts of learning how to fly. But in this video, I'll walk you step by step through a flight so you can get the majority of what you need to confidently talk on the radio the next time that you get in the plane. So we're gonna pretend that we are at Addison Airport, which is right here, right in the middle of all the Dallas Class B, which can be intimidating, like, oh no. But hopefully after this video, you realize it's not that scary. So if we zoom in here, this is actually where I'm based in my 182, and I'm based right here on Romeo. So when we get in the plane after we start up, the first thing we're going to do is grab the ATC at the field, which is the overall weather information. And every ATC broadcast is assigned a letter to be able to identify that you have the information from that ATC. So it starts with Alpha, then next hour it's Bravo, Charlie, etc. So let's pick up the ATC here at Addison and see what it is.
Addison ATC information Foxtrot 1547 Zulu. Wind 190 at 8. Visibility 1 tree. Sky conditions, few clouds at 2000. Temperature 26, dew point 7, altimeter 3028. Visual approach in use, landing, departing, runway 16. All arrivals to Addison contact regional approach on 124.25. For IFR clearance or vehicle flight following, contact ground control on 121.6. All IFR prop departures advise tower controller at the whole short line that you're IFR. Advise on initial contact, you have information Foxtrot.
Okay, so we have information Foxtrot. The next thing we're gonna do is contact ground control. Now, technically you don't actually have to contact ground until you're trying to get into what's called the movement area. And here at Addison, the movement area starts here, and you can tell it on the pavement. I'll pull out one of my flashcards here because there will be a solid line and a dashed line. I'll also throw it up on the screen to make it a little bit easier to see. And anything on the solid line, this is called the non-movement area, which is a little counterintuitively named. But if you are on this side of the line, which is where I'm at on taxiway Romeo, you don't actually need ground control's permission to be able to move around on there. But anytime you're trying to go to the dashed side of the line, this is the movement area and you need ATC approval to be able to operate in this space. If you're confused at all, you can just go ahead and contact ground here, but technically we don't really have to contact ground until we get up here, but we can go ahead and call ground if we're unsure. So when we call ground starting here, all of ATC communications can be boiled down to the same cadence. You say who you're talking to, then you say who you are, where you are, and what you want to do. Now that might feel like a long list to remember, but if you just think about it in real life, if you're calling like the plumber, this is exactly what you do. You would call them and say, hey, plumbing company, my name is Charlie. I live in Frisco and my water heater is busted. It's saying who you're talking to, who you are, where you are, and what you want. And it's no different in flying. So when we contact Addison Ground, we're gonna use that cadence. So you say, Addison Ground, Skylane 916 Delta Foxtrot, on taxiway Romeo with information Foxtrot, requesting taxi to 16, we will be VFR to the east. You're gonna tell them your direction of flight in there as well, just to give them a heads up. Now I know that already sounds like a mouthful, but I really just try to think about it chronologically. Like let's just kind of skip ahead for a second. You're just trying to tell them, hey, we're here, we need to go here so that we can take off and go this way, okay? Like try not to get too lost in what all do I need to tell them exactly? Just explain to them like you're human. What do you want to do? And since we're on the backside of Romeo here, we're not yet in the movement area, they're probably going to respond with something like Skylane 916 Delta Foxtrot, Addison Ground, report holding short of taxiway Alpha. And you'll just respond to them and say, report holding short of Alpha 916 Delta Foxtrot. So 2 quick things worth pointing out here. First, that first transmission when contacting ATC follows that cadence, the who you're talking to, who you are, where you are, and what you want to do. After that, you basically just repeat anything else ATC tells you. Easy. And 2, after that first transmission, air traffic control might start abbreviating your call sign to just the last 3 characters at some point. So November 916 Delta Foxtrot might be November 6 Delta Foxtrot and such, or it might be Skylane 6 Delta Foxtrot or Cessna 6 Delta Foxtrot. So during this video, you'll see it presented different ways, but on that first call, give them your full call sign. Okay, so we got that taxi instruction. So we're gonna taxi up here, get short of taxiway Alpha, and then we're gonna comply with what they say. Now we're gonna tell them we're holding short of Alpha. So you say, Addison Ground, Skylane 916 Delta Foxtrot, holding short of Alpha on Romeo. And then they'll give you further instructions here and they'll say, Skylane 916 Delta Foxtrot, Addison Ground, taxi to runway 16 via Alpha. And then you'll just read it back to him. You say, taxi to 16 via Alpha 916 Delta Foxtrot. So this was a pretty easy taxi instruction. You're just gonna taxi all the way on Alpha. But if they gave you something like really confusing, like one time I landed at Love Field, okay? and I landed, well, that's DFW. I was about to say, there's too many runways there. I landed at Love Field, and I landed on 31 left, okay? And I was trying to go like way over here. And so they said, okay, get off at Charlie 4, Charlie, Foxtrot. They gave me like this long instruction. I was just like really overwhelmed. And a really important thing you can do is just tell them you're not familiar with the field. You're requesting what's called a progressive taxi. And that is just going to alert the controller that you need some help, and they're happy to do it. And so at that point, like they basically just gave me 1 or 2 taxiway instructions at first. They said, okay, exit Charlie 4 and taxi, north on Charlie. So I did that. And then once I got up here, they said, hey, turn right on taxiway Foxtrot, hold short of Bravo or whatever. So that, like they're just going to give it to you in segments. So that's something you can use. But the big thing here is like when you're about to you're trying to depart or you're about to land at an airport, try to just look ahead a little bit, just for a minute, and try to see what kind of taxi instructions you're going to get, because you might not be that thrown off if you're like, okay, we know that we're landing, over here, but we need to go over here. I'm expecting some long instructions, so I'm going to be ready for that, to write things down or ask for a progressive or whatever. Or you might even be able to request a different runway so that your taxi instructions are going to be easier, because you just have to go here and here. So just look ahead a little bit. It's going to make you a little less surprised with whatever your taxi instructions are. Okay, so once we have taxied all the way down to the end of runway 16, we're down here, we've done our run up, and now we're ready for departure. You can switch your radio frequency over to the tower. You don't need any sort of permission or like frequency change approved. They know you're going to be switching over once you've concluded your taxi. And so here is where we're going to make the call to the tower. So when we're taking off, we're either going to be staying at the airport or going to be leaving. So let's cover if we were staying in the pattern. Now, Addison doesn't really allow kind of transient stuff like that, but let's assume that they did. You're at a less busy airport. You would just call them and again, tell them who you are, where you are, and what you want to do. So you'd say, Addison Tower, Skylane 916 Delta Foxtrot, ready for departure, runway 16, requesting closed traffic. Closed traffic just means you want to stay in the pattern. You could also say requesting to stay in the pattern. They're going to respond back to you with a possibility of a few different things. They could tell you to just hold short of the runway. They could tell you to line up and wait, which I'll cover in a second, or they could clear you for departure. So let's just say that they come back and they say 916 Delta Foxtrot, Addison Tower, hold short, runway 16, landing traffic. Okay, well then you need to read back all hold short instructions here. So you respond and you say, Skylane 916 Delta Foxtrot, holding short, runway 16. So you definitely want to make sure that you're holding short of the hold short lines, which I've got another flashcard on this. It looks a lot, and I'll put the digital version on the screen here, but it looks a lot like the non-movement area boundary, except it's just doubled up. So there's 2 solid lines, 2 dashed lines. One feature that I tried really hard to put into these flashcards is what I call a tip from the tower. So it's just kind of a helpful way to remember certain things. So like on this one, to remember what side of the hold short line you need to be holding on, I like to think about the dashed lines as something you can dash through. So if you are on that side, you're coming off the runway, those lines are porous. They have gaps in them. So if you're coming from that side, you can just go right through them. But if you're on the side with the solid lines, that's the side you have to hold short of. You can't cross those until you have permission to do so. So I tried really hard to make these flashcards helpful. There's over 350 of them in the set. I have a whole section on just airport operations and airspace and navigation, things we're talking about in this video. So if you'd like more information, a link is down in the description, and I hope it can help simplify a lot of this stuff for you. So they told us to wait, and now the landing traffic came by and they have landed here. So now they might tell you right as they're landing, Skylane 916 Delta Foxtrot, Addison Tower, runway 16, line up and wait. And you'd repeat back to them, runway 16, line up and wait, 916 Delta Foxtrot. And line up and wait used to be called taxi to position and hold, which just sounded cooler. Now it's line up and wait, which is exactly what it sounds like. You're literally just going to line up in your position for takeoff, and you're going to wait. You're not going to go anywhere. Because what's probably happening is the guy just landed and they're waiting for him to taxi off and whatever. But they're getting you in position just to kind of speed up the process. So once you are in position and you're holding, you lined up and you are waiting. This is when they're going to clear you for departure. So again, we're pretending that we're staying in the pattern here. So it would sound something like November 916 Delta Foxtrot, Addison Tower, runway 16, clear for takeoff, make left closed traffic. And you'd read it back to them. 916 Delta Foxtrot, cleared for takeoff, runway 16, make left closed traffic. So left closed traffic in this instance is just left turns. And so it's worth just kind of doing a review here on what the segments of the traffic pattern are. So if you're going to make left turns, This leg right here is upwind, which if you need a helpful way to remember that, just remember you're probably taking off into the wind. The wind is probably going this direction. So when you're up here, you are upwind of the runway. That's why it's called that. When you turn here, this is called crosswind. So you're left crosswind off of runway 16. When you turn over here, you're left downwind runway 16. Here is left base runway 16, and this would be final runway 16. So they might give you different instructions, you know, referencing those different segments of the traffic pattern. So just you want to keep those top of mind. But we'll cover some of that when we are coming back into the airport here. But let's switch situations here, and let's say we're not just staying in the pattern, but we want to depart to the east and go do some air work or whatever. So the call would be a little bit different to tower. Remember, we're sitting over here holding short of runway 16. You'd call them and say, Addison Tower, Skylane 916 Delta Foxtrot, ready for departure runway 16, VFR to the east. You're just telling them your direction of flight. They'll get back to you and say, November 916 Delta Foxtrot, Addison Tower, you're cleared for takeoff runway 16, eastbound departure approved. And you'll respond, cleared for takeoff runway 16, Skylane 6 Delta Foxtrot. Great, we've gotten our takeoff clearance here. So now we can take off, we can make our left-hand turn and go eastbound. What happens when we get to the boundary here of the class Delta airspace? Well, if you're just departing just under VFR, they're probably not going to give you a frequency change. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they'll say, you know, frequency change approved or whatnot. But if not, if they don't give that to you, once you're outside of their airspace, you don't really have to be talking to them anymore. You can still monitor the tower if you want, but don't be surprised if as you're leaving, they just don't say anything and it's kind of a quiet Irish goodbye, so to speak. And that's totally fine. That's totally normal. Or they might tell you frequency change approved. So then we're out eastbound, no big deal. Let's reverse the process. Let's say that we came out here, we did our landings, we did different things, and now we're coming back into Addison. The first thing we're gonna do is listen to the ATC. Now let's pretend we weren't gone very long and it's still information Foxtrot, the same instructions that we heard earlier. But there is one key thing that really didn't pertain to you on departure, but it does pertain to you now that you are approaching the airport. Let's play that part back.
All arrivals to Addison contact regional approach on 124.25.
So they want us to contact regional approach before we ever talk to the tower. Now, if you're going into most class Delta airports, they're not going to have this. Like if we were going into Greenville or something, you're not going to have to talk to an approach controller. And so we'll cover what you do about approach here. But once we get about here, we're going to get handed off to the tower anyways. And then we would make the same calls that we would make approaching this airspace, just like we were approaching Greenville or Mesquite or different things. And so this isn't too much of a curveball. It's just an added step since Addison is really busy. So when we get here, again, it's just who you're talking to, then who you are, where you are, and what you want to do. So we have information Foxtrot at Addison. Approach is going to want to know that. So here's what the call would look like. Approach Skylane 916 Delta Foxtrot, 7 miles north of Rockwall Airport, 2,500 inbound to Addison with information Foxtrot. Now that might sound like a mouthful, but again, it's really easy. Like you're just saying you're north of Rockwall, we're at 2,500. We're going to Addison, we have information Foxtrot. And they'll reply with something like this. They'll say, November 916 Delta Foxtrot, approach squawk 3214. Okay, well then you just read that back to them. Squawk 3214, 916 Delta Foxtrot. They're going to pick you up on radar, and then they're going to call you back. November 916 Delta Foxtrot, approach radar contact 7 miles north of the Rockwall Airport. Maintain 2,500, enter left downwind, runway 16 at Addison. And you'd respond, maintain 2,500, enter left downwind, runway 16 at Addison, 916 Delta Foxtrot. So we're flying along here. Again, this is why it was helpful to review the segments of the airport pattern here, because if they're saying enter a left downwind for runway 16, that means our aiming point is going to be somewhere around here to enter the left downwind. So we're cruising along, and now we're expecting a handoff to tower. So depending on how busy they are, if it's not busy at all, they might hand you off like way out here. If it's really busy, they might hand you off here. Either way, the next call is going to be your normal call for when you're approaching a towered airport. So this would be the same as if you weren't even talking to approach here. Like if we were going into Mesquite or something, this is the same call that you would give Mesquite once regional approach hands you off. So they'll tell you, November 916 Delta Foxtrot, approach, contact Addison Tower 126.0. You'll read back to them, contact Tower 126.0, 916 Delta Foxtrot. That was your handoff. Now we're switching over to tower. So let's pretend we're right here and we are, about about 7 miles to the east or so, still at 2,500. So you would contact tower and say, Addison Tower, Skylane 916 Delta Foxtrot, 2,500, 7 miles to the east, inbound full stop, runway 16. Now it's helpful to tell them what type of landing you want to make. Like if you were inbound for touch and goes or stop and goes or low approach only, it's helpful to go ahead and notify them of this. At Addison, they're kind of only expecting you to do full stop landings, but if you were going to anywhere else, Mesquite or all these other places, you definitely want to tell them your intentions so they can sequence you appropriately. One thing worth adding here is that you'd also normally tell the tower that you have information Foxtrot. Now, since we already told approach control that we had Foxtrot, we didn't repeat it here, but that's normally information you'd include when calling the tower. So they'll get back to you and they'll say, 916 Delta Foxtrot, Addison Tower, maintain 2,500, enter the midfield left downwind, runway 16. And you would reply, maintain 2,500, enter midfield left downwind, runway 16, 916 Delta Foxtrot. So now we have our instructions. We're going here to enter a midfield left downwind. They're probably keeping you kind of high in this situation because they probably have other departures that they're trying to get out underneath you and they don't want you to be in the way. So if they keep you high, don't worry about it. They're gonna let you descend at some point. So right about here, they might tell you, they might give you permission to descend. And so that might look something like this. November 916 Delta Foxtrot, Addison Tower, descend at pilot's discretion. And you'd read back to them, 916 Delta Foxtrot, descending at our discretion. So remember, they've given us the instructions to enter a midfield left downwind. So we turn our downwind, and here's where a number of things could happen, just depending on what's going at the airport that day. If they're not busy at all, they might just go ahead and give you a landing clearance. They've already told us we're cleared to descend. And here they might say, November 916 Delta Foxtrot, Addison Tower, cleared to land runway 16. And you'd read back to them real simply, cleared to land runway 16, 916 Delta Foxtrot. Real easy, but we're at Addison. It can never be that easy, right? A few things that could happen. One is they could tell you to start looking for traffic, and let's pretend there's another bogey over here. So you turn your downwind, and they give you the call. November 916 Delta Foxtrot, Addison Tower, traffic 11 o'clock, 2000 Piper Archer. Report them in sight. You would tell them, looking for traffic, 916 Delta Foxtrot. So now we're looking, but you're not just looking for traffic. One key thing here is they're probably having you look for them because you're going to follow them. So you look for the traffic, and then once you have them in sight, you would just tell the tower, Addison Tower, 6 Delta Foxtrot, traffic in sight. So then they'll tell you, November 6 Delta Foxtrot, Addison Tower, follow that traffic. You're cleared to land number 2, runway 16. So now we know we're following him. We are second in line to land. So you'd read that back to them. You'd say, clear to land runway 16, number 2, 916 Delta Foxtrot. Okay. Another thing that could happen is, let's say that traffic is not that close. Okay. You're not following a Piper Archer. You're following a Gulfstream, and they're way out here, but they're cooking. They're going really fast. And so air traffic control is thinking, well, you're just a little Cessna. I don't know how quickly you can land, so I'm not gonna expect you to make a really short approach. Sometimes they give that to you, and it's really fun as you just kind of do a diving turn to the runway. But more often, if there's a huge airplane coming in, they're just going to play it safe and keep you out of the way. So they know that you probably can't see this jet traffic out here. So instead of telling you to look for them just yet, they're instead just going to extend your downwind. So the call would look like this. They would say, November 6 Delta Foxtrot, Addison Tower, extend left downwind. I will call your base. Okay, so now you're just in kind of unending territory here until they decide to turn you inbound. But you read it back to them. Say, extend our downwind, you'll call our base 6 Delta Foxtrot. So now you're just going parallel to the runway up here, and then they'll probably tell you to look out for that traffic just like we did in the previous call, and then they'll clear you to land number 2 and you come all the way back in. But obviously just remember, you can't land until you've been given clearance to land. But another way they might clear you to land is by giving you an instruction called cleared for the option. So it might look exactly like everything we just said, but they'll say, clear for the option, runway 16. So what is the option? Well, the option is what it sounds like. You have the option to either do a full stop landing, you can do a touch and go, stop and go, low approach, missed approach, if you're IFR, that kind of thing. And so it just gives you the option to do what you want. So none of the radio calls really change. Just instead of saying you are cleared to land, they'll say you are cleared for the option. And that is the same as a landing clearance, but you also have the optionality to do those other things that I just mentioned. Now, let's say that you have landed. Oh, my landing guy was way over here. Let's say you landed and now you're coming off of the runway. They're going to give you another call here. They're going to say, November 6 Delta Foxtrot, Addison Tower, make a left turn off at Golf, cross the hold short lines onto Alpha, contact ground point 6. There's a lot there, right? But it doesn't have to be that complicated, right? They're just telling you to turn off at Golf, onto taxiway Alpha, cross the hold short lines here, because you're technically not off the runway until every part of your airplane is across those lines. So they want you to get off the runway, onto Alpha, and then contact ground 0.6. Well, what the heck is 0.6? Well, if they ever just tell you in an abbreviated fashion like that, it's always 121 point whatever, 0.6, 0.65, whatever they tell you. So sometimes they'll tell you contact ground 121.6. A lot of times they're going to shorthand it and say contact ground 0.6, contact ground 0.9, whatever. But that's what that means. Now, another thing they could give you is while you're still on the runway, they could say, November 6 Delta Foxtrot, Addison Tower, where are you parked? And you could tell them 6 Delta Foxtrot is parked on Romeo. And if they're not very busy, they might go ahead and give you the taxi instructions. So they might say, November 6 Delta Foxtrot, Addison Tower, make a left turn off at Golf, taxi to Romeo via Alpha, monitor ground 0.6. So then you read it back and you say, left turn at Golf, then taxi to Romeo via Alpha, monitor ground 0.6, 6 Delta Foxtrot. Okay, so they've already given that to you. So you could start taxiing and you're monitoring ground control and stuff, because then they might tell you, oh, there's somebody coming out of Tango here. And so they'll say, November 916 Delta Foxtrot, Addison ground, hold short of taxiway Tango. You'd read it back to them, hold short of taxiway Tango, 916 Delta Foxtrot. Okay, so you're going to go here and you're going to stop because they got somebody, maintenance tug or something coming out here or whatever. And then they'll tell you, okay, you can continue taxiing, and you do so. And you come back down here all the way to Romeo. You're going to go past the non-movement area lines here. And then once you're back in here, like if there's another airplane you need to kind of go around or something, you don't need ground control's permission to do that because, again, you're in the non-movement area at this point. You're behind this line, and you're back at your hangar. Now, there's two things that I left out of this video. One is VFR flight following, and two is curveballs. Now, while this is most of what to expect, it's not all of what you could expect. And so in the video on the screen, I encounter like 90% of everything you're going to experience in ATC as a private pilot. Promise it can help simplify things for you and make it a little bit easier. So I'll see you in that video.